Good morning to the Suppress Herald, episode 71. And this is Friday, the 13th of March. And we are continuing to look at propaganda like no other right here. As I've said many times, prop politics is local and so is propaganda. And here at the Suppress Herald in Maine, I'm sure it's being repeated across the country. We know it's being repeated by the national news, the New York Times and Washington Compost and CBS and NBC and CNN and whatever they call messed up now, cable news. And we want to start today. I'm going to be very focused today. And we've been following, if you've listened to these podcasts, I've talked about the propaganda surrounding global warming and whatever they want to call it, climate change, global warming, definition of propaganda. You know, start with the big lie and then repeat, repeat, repeat. And the big lie is has to do with CO2 causing global warming, greenhouse gases, and that the temperature is rising alarmingly fast and we're all going to die. And using that, and that's what I really want to deal with today, is specifically look at energy prices here in Maine and what's happened to them. And, I went to a Republican governor's debate this week, and it's one of the big issues here in Maine. We've had electric prices double in the last few years, and nobody seems to really be focusing in on what really happened. And it all starts with this: global warming, scaring us into doing stupid things that don't make any business, economic, or sense as far as reality goes for how we're going to deal with energy. And the energy suicide that the liberal side of the aisle has been putting us on, and here in Maine, it's on steroids. And I want to really talk about exactly what it is. But first, they had to get us into a position where they could drive these stupid policies. And it starts like this. This was in the paper this week, and this was an article in the Suppress Herald. And reading right from it, for frigid East, it may be hard to fathom, but U.S. had its second warmest winter on record. Now, if you've been living in anywhere in the eastern U.S., including Florida, Georgia, Mississippi, even the West, Dallas, Texas. I flew into Dallas back in, end of January, beginning of February, and Dallas, for 100 miles outside of Dallas, the ground was white, snow on the ground, unheard of. We have had a very cold, very snowy winter in the Northeast. Everybody knows that, almost alarmingly so. They've had crop issues all the way in Florida, all the rest. And yet, here's the headline. And here's the best part, okay? This is this is relying on nothing but propaganda. It may be cold comfort for Americans in the East and Midwest who shivered through blizzards and sub-freezing blitzes, but this past winter was the second warmest on record for the continental United States, federal meteorologists calculated Monday. Now, this goes on to say that, the lower 48 states averaged 37.13 degrees. The U.S. winter average temperature is 32.2 degrees. And they talk about that's just 1/3 of a degree below that of the warmest winter, a record set 2 years ago. So they're talking about these temperatures rising, and everybody knows that's the narrative, that's the big lie. And we are talking about scaring the hell out of everybody, and it's all about these temperatures. Here's the best part, which defies reality here. The East, especially the Northeast, had winter, Vose said, who was author of this. In the West, there were certainly places where you could say we missed the winter. 9 states broke or tied records for the warmest winter. One of those is Nevada. Keep that in mind going forward. So you had the southeast, or excuse me, the southwest, Colorado, Arizona, Nevada, New Mexico, Oklahoma, Oregon, Texas, Utah, and Wyoming, according to NOAA. Okay. Now, this is the best part. And the cold, while it seemed harsh and long lasting, didn't stretch all winter, said Yale Climate Connections meteorologist Jeff Masters. Yale Climate Connections, funded by climate dollars, funded by the global warming, you know, propagandists, and taking funding for all their studies to lie to us time and time again. At the end of this article, and this is the best part, okay, now remember, second warmest on record. February was the fourth warmest. January was the 24th warmest. And December was the fifth warmest. So 3 months, December, January, February. Now remember, we are in early to middle of March. It's 13th of March today. This article has got data from December, January, February. Not one of those months was anywhere near the second warmest. Again, fourth warmest February, 24th warmest January, and fifth warmest December. How do you end up with the second warmest winter based on those numbers? Doesn't make sense now, does it? So that's the propaganda. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever, but they're willing to print it because it's scare tactics 101. Now, I want to bring up an article that somehow doesn't make it into the Suppress Herald. This is from the Heartland Institute, which is really studying what's going on with the climate. And this is really really interesting now. Okay, so you've got this second warmest on record, mostly based on the Southwest, including, and remember this, Nevada. Heartland's research shows the federal government's temperature station at Reno Tahoe, Nevada, International Airport is reporting 1 to 3 degrees Fahrenheit of artificial warming. For context, 1 to 3 degrees is roughly equal to the total amount of warming that has been claimed for the entire state of Nevada since 1900. Their sensors, temperature sensors, are off by the amount of warming they're reporting since 1900. Why is this? It is because the temperature sensors are in heat islands. The place where they're getting this data that used to be on the airport outside of town, which is surrounded by, farmers' fields, woodlands, rural. That's typical for airports in the US. What's happened over the last 40 years or less is that it expanded with growth of that urban area. And so now what you have is development, pavement, roofs, buildings, concrete, streets, heat islands. All right. And so later in this article, it shows you that the data revealed that most of the heat bias occurs at night when pavement and buildings release the heat that they absorb during the day while natural landscapes cool. The Heartland Institute is putting new stations across the country. And this is being very consistently shown that heat islands are influencing the data. They know this, but they are not telling you. So what we have is the whole thing of global warming and temperatures rising is biased because of where they're getting the data. When you have models, when you have these models they're using for climate models, it's very simple. Crap in, crap out. Their data is flawed, but nobody wants to talk about that. So that sets the stage for what we've got in Maine. The alarmists went ahead and said, oh, we've got to stop global warming. We've got to stop burning fossil fuels. We've got to go all renewable. Maine's energy problems started all the way back when Angus King, now Senator Angus King, back then Governor Angus King, put in a mandate that the state of Maine must do a significant portion of its electric generation had to come from renewables. In that requirement, in that law, was basically the rejection of using large capacity hydro, about as renewable as you can get. And actually, hydro and solar go very well together. Hydro or solar and wind do not. But they precluded the state from meeting its mandates for renewable energy with anything that was 25 megawatts or greater, which is, call it Hydro-Quebec, and to alleviate our problem that way. That left nothing but wind and solar. Governor Angus King then left the governor's office after he put this mandate in place, got in with a wind company, a wind developer, went to Washington, went to Obama's White House, got $35 million for doing wind in Maine. And there was a stipulation in that grant that he got, a grant, which is cash handed to them to build wind in Maine. There was a stipulation that it was going to be new, better technology that they were implementing. That's why they were giving them the grant. There was no new technology ever put up. After he got the $35 million grant, he went across the street to the Department of Energy and got a $125 million loan guarantee for his wind farms. Then he went back to Maine and decided, when Olympia Snowe retired, that he was going to run for Senate. So he divested, he sold off his share in the wind farm. I'm not sure he ever actually produced a watt of energy with that $160 million that he got in Washington, our tax dollars, in effect. He cashed out. He divested of his interest in the wind company so that he could be, no conflicts when he ran for Senate, and pocketed millions and millions of dollars. We don't know how many millions, but he pocketed millions of dollars, became a multimillionaire at our expense, and left the state of Maine with this mandate. Then what you have is solar. And we came up with the RGGI, Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, which is a carbon tax on energy producers that burn fossil fuels. So coal, oil, and especially gas, which Maine gets a significant portion of our electricity from gas generating stations. Those generators are taxed with the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, and those taxes have been rising. It's a carbon tax. Well, those generators don't eat that. That is reflected in the electric rates, the amount of the electricity they sell. If you have to pay more to generate electricity from a gas plant, then you're going to pass that along in increased energy rates. Now that RGGI money went into a pool, and paid for energy efficiency. So those are rebates for putting in heat pumps, rebates for doing solar, rebates for energy production, renewable energy production, especially energy efficiency, and primarily in heat pumps. And we've been putting in heat pumps at a really rapid rate. The funny thing is, the price of putting in a heat pump went up about the same as the price of that rebate on that day. I can tell you, because I work in this industry, that the cost of installing heat pumps went up in a perfectly symmetrical line in proportion to the amount of rebates that are getting. In other words, if you got $1,000 rebate for putting in a heat pump into your home, the contractor charged you $800 to $1,000 extra to put in those heat pumps because they knew you had a tax credit, a rebate coming, incentives. Those incentives went into the pockets of now very wealthy contractors doing heat pumps and other things. No impact on the cost. Psychologically, you think you saved money. Oh, I got a rebate. Same with solar. There is no rebate for solar, federal rebate for solar anymore. But you watch, the price of solar installations is going to come down by 20 to 30%, which was the 30% tax credit that the federal government was giving for solar installations. So now you had Angus King put in a mandate, excluded large hydro, and then started a wind farm, got millions of dollars, put a big chunk of that in his pocket and walked away before he ever built any wind farms. Then you have Reggie, which is a tax on the generators of electricity that use gas, oil, or coal. And we have a lot of gas production in Maine. Then you had the solar net metering, which is costing Mainers hundreds. Last I saw was over $600 million a year because those solar farms, anything they sell back to Central Maine Power or any of the other electric delivery companies, the companies that are providing electricity to Mainers, they sell that excess at retail price, not at wholesale that they can, Central Maine Power, for example, can buy wholesale from wind farms and especially from gas production. They have to pay that same rate to the solar farms that are selling it. What that means is that the developers of the solar farms are making huge profits on their net metering deal. And that gets passed on to the consumers of electricity. And last I saw, it's over $600 million a year and climbing toward $1 billion a year that are going to appear on your electric bills. And let's go to the last impact. All of the Democrat, liberal governors in New England, including New York, have blocked gas pipelines providing basically enough gas to all the way through to Maine, and Maine being at the end of that pipeline that exists today, which is constrained when it's very cold and you have very high output required. The wind doesn't shine, or we have a snowstorm. Anybody that's got eyes and ears driving down the road and seeing a wind farm after a snowstorm can come to the conclusion, which is the truth, is that a wind farm that's covered with snow, or excuse me, a solar farm covered with snow is producing no electricity. Oftentimes after a snowstorm goes through, you have clear, bright blue skies, very cold temperatures, and no wind. So your renewables are shut down at the time you need it most. And so the gas is your backup. But gas, because of we're constrained with the pipelines that they refused to build all these liberal, green, wacko governors in New England refusing to run a pipeline from where they have abundant and inexpensive gas from the fracking sites in Pennsylvania. We end up paying outrageously high gas prices, and that is reflected with the electric rates. Let's be honest. Liberal, Democrat idiots put us here. Now they're trying to deflect and blame it on everything but them. This is simple. They did this. Angus King started it with his stupid mandate, not knowing that renewables would be able to meet our demands. Actually, if he had any sense, he would have known they can't, because the wind doesn't always blow, the sun doesn't always shine. Now they're talking about battery backups. Battery backups last for a day. If you have 3 days of cold, no wind, and the snow covers the solar, you're done. Brownouts, people are going to have real problems. Electric rates are going to go absolutely through the roof even more. It's called stupid. Simple as that. But they've done this to us because of global warming falsehoods, scaring us and allowing them to do this against our better interests. Then you throw on top of that one last thing. We had the Clean Energy Connect, a power line come from Canada, Quebec, that has abundant, clean, and very renewable and inexpensive electricity from their hydropower. We ran a Clean Energy Connect electric power line from Canada down to Massachusetts. Well, it comes to Maine and then feeds into the grid. But that electricity, inexpensive, renewable, reliable electricity from Quebec, goes 100% to Massachusetts to meet its renewable energy mandate. They allow big hydro to meet renewable energy mandates. Maine does not. We could have used that power here in Maine, and as I mentioned earlier, solar and hydro work very well together. When the sun goes down, you open the gates on the dams, and that hydro feeds in. When the sun comes up, you can scale back on the hydro, and you can run the solar to do your daytime electricity. If you have a snowstorm and you don't get the sun you need for solar, you can keep the dam open and produce hydro. These people, Democrats, liberals, global warmist idiots, have done this to Maine. Make no bones about that. This was done not deliberately. They just are not smart and had no idea what they were doing. They were just in a rush to save the earth because we're all going to die because of global warming, which, as I pointed out, turns out is probably overblown at worst and non-existent at best. And this is the situation that we've been put in by these liberal politicians. And I want to stress, the suppress Herald and the media with their propaganda have been driving this for a very long time, scaring people, scaring an entire generation that they think there's no future for the earth because of global warming and climate change. And now look what's happening. We have, I believe, the third highest electric rates in the country. The only continental US, Hawaii is the highest, and that's because Hawaii is an island and they have to bring in fuel to power generators and so forth for electricity. They have a lot of sun, they have a lot of wind, but that's not going to do it because those are intermittent. They only work when the wind blows for wind and when the sun shines for solar. So their energy is expensive. They don't have any domestic source of gas or oil or coal or any other generating. California is the other. They're the highest rates, and that's for good reason. They are the global warmest wackos of the planet. And they have put themselves in a position where they've got rolling blackouts. They tried a big battery storage facility, huge. I believe it was the biggest in the country, maybe the biggest in the world, and in California, and it caught fire and burned for weeks. That's the problem with those batteries. They are very, very flammable, and once they catch fire, they're very difficult to put out. So there you have it. Maine went off the cliff with the likes of California with stupid policy, unrealistic expectations for what wind and solar could do, the exclusion of big hydro. So we get to have a line come through Maine and power renewable energy for Massachusetts at a much lower cost. And we're stuck with what Angus King, who got wealthy off of our taxpayer dollars and then walked away and went to the Senate and is now trying to do what he did to Maine to the whole country. And we're stuck with 25 cents a kilowatt hour or whatever it is now. It just keeps climbing and it's going to get worse. Renewable energy is not going to save us from this mess. And it's going to take time, if they ever figure it out, to put in either, they're talking about small nuclear, small nuclear plants, more localized, or running a gas pipeline to get us gas that's inexpensive if you have enough delivery. That'll take time. We're stuck with this mess. It's liberals and Democrats that did it. And it's the suppressed Herald and the media that drove this whole mess, basically ignored reality, didn't listen to people that actually knew what they were talking about, and we're stuck. So the suppressed Herald, Angus King, if you want to know why we have the electric rates we have that are unaffordable, there you have it. It's that simple. But as I've said, politics is local and so is propaganda. And propaganda won on this battle. And the Maine people are the losers. That's all we've got to say today. So just wanted to make sure you understand that, understand how this happened. It's propaganda that drove us down this path. It's covering up for the likes of Angus King. Now we've got Angus the Third running for governor. And guess what? Angus the Third has made his living recently in renewable energy, more than likely subsidized by you, the taxpayer, that are filling his coffers personally and making him wealthy at your expense with unrealistic expectations of what renewable energy at this juncture can do. Time for a dose of reality. And, the entire Democrat side is going to keep us going down this road. And you can expect 50 cents a kilowatt hour, another doubling in electric rates when we have a situation where they drive us to have electric cars and heat pumps replacing everything. The demand for electricity will not be met by renewables that shut off when the sun goes down and the wind doesn't blow. It's an insane path that we're on. And until we wake up and don't elect another governor, especially an Angus King III, who would just continue robbing taxpayers to enrich himself and putting in policies that end up costing taxpayers dearly on the electric side, energy. Hannah Pingree, another one. She was the head of the sustainability whatever office for the governor. All in with all this nonsense. Until we wake up, we shouldn't complain about the electric rates in Maine until we wake up to the reality of what they did and we understand that this all started with Angus King, who everybody thinks is such a wonderful senator. Wake up, people. He enriched himself very significantly at our expense, and left us with this mess. It's his doing that started it all, and then a continuous run of Democrat liberal policies, global warmists, put us in this mess. And we're not saving the world by doing what they're doing. We're not going to save the world by making gas extremely expensive and electric rates crazy. That isn't going to work. Wake up, and hopefully we can turn this thing around. With that, remember, politics is local, so is propaganda. Spread the word. Please share this podcast. Let people know this is critical. Energy in Maine is outrageously expensive, and until we make a change in Augusta, it's going to continue that way. This is a big issue. Thanks for now. But again, share, follow, and let people know about this.